when the money starts to lose its value, you start to want more of it because it doesn't last in your hands. People who would not steal otherwise, people who would not prostitute themselves, begin to do that out of desperation. So fiat has destroyed, it's not only destroying commodity quality, it's not only making things more expensive, it is literally turning the people into monsters.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's wolfnyc, WOLFNYC.com.
Econ Bro, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. We connected on Twitter, and after a little bit of discussion, I thought you would be an excellent guest to have on and continue our series of episodes where we are exploring the nature of money in specific countries today. Just by way of quick introduction, you are an Austrian economist living in Nigeria.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about what is money in Nigeria today. But to get started, I would love for you to share just a little bit about your personal journey into economics, money, liberty, and how as you said, you've taken a journey from statism to liberty. So maybe we could just start with a little bit of your background and your journey to this point.
Okay, sure. So I studied economics at university. And how I got to study that is a long story. It's irrelevant. I studied economics at university, and of course, regardless of where you study economics in the world, whether it's in the US or in Nigeria or in France, they pretty much teach you the same thing, just basic Keynesianism. So while I was at university, I used to have conflict with my lecturers, my professors. I used to have questions they couldn't answer. And initially I thought they couldn't answer my questions because I thought they were inferior lecturers. So after getting my bachelor's degree in economics, I wanted to advance my studies. So I applied for a scholarship at Caltech, California Institute of Technology, to study economics there. And I didn't get the scholarship, and I didn't have enough money to afford paying the tuition and all that. So I decided that I would just study online. I thought that I thought all the material is already out there, so I'll just read up online. I don't need a degree to actually know economics, right? So I started to study, and then I found out, that was when I found out that the problem wasn't with my professors in school, but it was with the economics we were taught at university. So I started to study, and then eventually I came across Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, F.A. Hayek, and I looked into other schools of thought. And then I was very, very familiar with free market economics after looking into all the aforementioned people. I didn't really know anything about Mises. I had never heard the name. I had heard Mises, but I'd never heard Rothbard. So it was sometime in 2021 or 22, I can't remember. I was watching a podcast where Dave Smith was on, the comedian. Dave Smith was on, Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen. They were on a podcast, and then Dave Smith said he's a Rothbardian, and then I was curious, what's that? So I looked up Rothbardian, and then I saw Rothbard. So I started to study his works, and I've skipped over a whole lot, but I was blown away by, so I was already into Hayek and Sowell and Milton Friedman. So reading Rothbard, and eventually that was what led me to Mises, pretty much the same thing, just changed my whole perspective, not just on economics, but my perspective on life in general. So that's how I basically became an anarcho-capitalist, so full-time Austrian economist and anarcho-capitalist. So in summary, that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, it's a cool journey, and mirrors many people that I know. They typically discover one of the Austrian authors, and they really jive with one of them, whether it's Mises, often Hayek, often Rothbard. What was your entry point into Rothbard? Which books of his did you go into first?
The Case Against the Fed was my first book, and Man, Economy and State, obviously.
Yeah.
But The Case Against the Fed was my first book, because the reason why I went for that was because, as I said, I had already studied Thomas Sowell and a little bit of Hayek and Milton Friedman, and I eventually got to find out, because I thought, what would anyone have against Milton Friedman, right? That was what I was thinking. And then I discovered that the only difference between, or the major difference between Milton Friedman and those of the Austrians, who is what they believe on money. There are other differences, but that was the major one. So I really didn't know much about money. I didn't know more than what I was told at school about money. So I went straight for Rothbard books that had to do with money, to see what the difference was. And that was what led me to The Case Against the Fed, and what has government done to our money. Eventually, Theory of Money and Credit, I've Money Sound and Unsound by Joe Salerno. I still have Huerta de Soto's book lined up to read. I've read The Ethics of Money Production by Yorki de Hulsman. Pretty much most of the good stuff I've read. So
yeah, I've read many of those, not all of them, and I'm not actually very familiar with Milton Friedman's work. I've seen some of his speeches, but I've not read any of his work. What were the light bulb moments for you as you started to transition into Austrian economics?
What were the what moments?
Some of the light bulb moments, like the aha moments where you said, whatever you weren't learning in school, and then maybe all of a sudden it made sense once you got into Austrian economics.
Yeah, so for money specifically, when we were taught something called the money multiplier at university, it didn't make sense to me. I didn't know where money came from. I didn't understand how the equation factored into anything in real life. So it was when I started to read The Case Against the Fed, and I discovered the evil of not just central bank counterfeiting, but fractional reserve credit expansion, which then the money multiplier equation just represents that my mind was blown. I was like, what sorcery is this? And that was one of the major things for me, finding out that not only do the central banks have the ability to counterfeit currency, but the commercial banks, with the help of the central banks, can actually do the same thing. And then, of course, that leads you eventually to Cantillon effects and to boom and bust cycles, as explained by the Austrian business cycle theory. And, so it was that was it for me.
Gotcha. You said the difference between Friedman and Rothbard was largely on money. What was the divergence in their viewpoints?
First of all, Milton Friedman did not believe in markets. Unlike Hayek, who believed that there was, he wrote the Denationalization of Money, Hayek's great book. Milton Friedman believed that money should be controlled by the states. He believed in fiat. He was very anti-gold. I wonder what his stance would have been on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, but he believed that the Great Depression happened not because of expansion of money and credit, as Austrian economists believe, but he believed that the Federal Reserve was responsible because his explanation was that they did not inflate the currency when they should have. So we are here complaining that inflating the currencies was causing the problem, and Milton Friedman said the problem is we have the problem because the Fed did not inflate on time or did not inflate enough. So that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's amazing that someone that is considered to be such a prominent leader in economics recently, right? I mean, this guy was a prominent economic thinker of the 20th century, could have views that are just so ridiculous, right? We didn't counterfeit enough money to get the economy going again. It's crazy.
Hayek once called him, I saw a video where Hayek called him a Keynesian. And I completely agree, because his monetary policy is really not too different from Keynes's monetary theory, monetary policy. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it seems, because he's also known to be like a proponent of free markets, but I don't, those two things don't reconcile for me. It's like you can't be a proponent for free markets, but then think that somehow the market for money is an exception that needs to be centrally planned. That's just ridiculous. Like, oh, let's have free markets in cars, but not in potato chips. We need to centrally plan those. It's like, why? These are all market goods. It's just, I don't know. It's absurd.
So it's not altogether incoherent if you are coming from a Keynesian perspective, as I did. I thought money was a separate thing entirely. One of the breakthroughs of the Austrian school I received from the Austrian school was when I learned that money is actually a commodity. Money emerged out of being a commodity. So that was a light bulb moment for me as well. So I thought money was something else entirely. So I was fine with markets when I was looking into, when I was learning from Milton Friedman. I was fine with markets being free, but I had no idea that there was such a thing as market money, as money existing apart from the state. So it sounds ridiculous now, but back then it made a lot of sense,
Yeah. Definitely makes sense in a Keynesian framework, but I don't know, I guess peeling the layers back, it's like, where else could have money come from, right? We've had markets longer than we've had states. But yeah, before I discovered Austrian economics, I too shared the delusion that money was perhaps somehow different. But I don't know. And now, I guess like all things, when you learn them, they seem sort of obvious in retrospect.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so that's cool. So you live in Nigeria, you're an Austrian economist. Let's dive into the topic of today's show, which is really, what is money in Nigeria? And I guess we should start with the monetary history of Nigeria, just sort of build it up into the current day. So Where should we start this journey?
Our monetary history is divided into, I think, maybe 3 or 4 periods. Let me put it that way. We have the pre-colonial era, where we used, had actual commodity monies like cowries, manillas, beads, bottles, salt, iron nails. So this was before colonialism. So we had our own money, and some of these monies actually existed well into the colonial era. As recently as in the 20th century, I know cowries were still used as money in the country. I mean, even to this day, rather, there are places in Nigeria where cattle is used in certain transactions. Not like you use cattle to buy a loaf of bread, but maybe someone wants to marry a woman in some village. In certain parts of the country, you can actually pay the bride price with cattle. So technically, it's not money, but if you think about it, it is money, because you're using it to purchase or pay for your wife. I'm being careful with those words. Even though we do have slavery here still, but just to make sure I'm not encouraging that. So that's the pre-colonial money, all those kinds of things. And so our first major currency issue in Nigeria was, I think, in 1880, when the British introduced the shillings and the pence as legal tender currency in British West Africa. So it wasn't just in Nigeria. Nigeria was officially amalgamated in 1914. So before that, it was just Nigeria. It was West Africa, right? So we became Nigeria in 1914, a sovereign people. So in 1880 was when we had our first major currency issue. So we used that till. And by the way, these shillings were issued by private banks. So it wasn't like there was one central bank at the time supplying this currency. I don't know the details of how that worked, but I can imagine. I don't know the exact details, but I can imagine how that would have played out. So in 1912 to 1959, we had the West African Currency Board, which issued the first set of banks and coins in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia, the West African region. So the West African Currency Board issued the pound, it was called the pound, that's what we called it. My parents actually used pounds in Nigeria, so I think it's interesting that the West African Currency Board was established in 1912. At the same time, the Federal Reserve was getting ready to take off. When I was looking this up, when I was studying this, I found a few things that were a few coincidences that they just seemed. Anyway, let me not get conspiratorial here. So 1912 was.
Oh, you're in the right place to be conspiratorial. We're all about. So backing? Do you know who was backing the West African Currency Board? Was this related to Europe or North America?
Yeah, it was the British. Yeah, it was the British. So because we were colonized by Britain. Now, I was. If you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I believe you would have, if you listen to any one of G. Ed Griffin's talks, he spoke about in the 1950s when the U.S. Federal Reserve sent out ambassadors to countries, or central bank ambassadors, to preach central banking to countries.
Yeah.
And in 1959, still in the 50s, was when Nigeria got her central bank. So those dates, 1912 and 1959, they seem too suspicious for me. So I think I think this was pushed on the Nigerian people. I don't think we woke up one morning and decided we want a central bank,
Sure.
So I think it was pushed on us. So anyway, in 1959, we had our central bank that issued Nigerian currency banknotes, So eventually we switched from the Nigerian pound to the Nigerian naira. So if I'm not mistaken, the Nigerian naira in the 60s was equal to, in the 70s was equal to, I think one naira was equal to 1 British pound, $2, something like that. The exchange rate was basically 1 to 1 or 2 to 1. I can't remember off the top of my head when we first had the Nigerian naira. Just interestingly, literally today, $1 is worth 1,520 naira.
Wow. So it's
like
somewhere between like 750 and 50.
Terribly.
Yeah. Wow.
Terribly. That's like that's like 1,000,000% of its value lost. It's terrible. Anyway, so we got our central bank, we got our own currency, and since then we've been using the naira, and the naira has been falling in value since. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So the naira has basically been falling in value since it was worthless to begin with. It's just useless paper and worthless coins. So we don't use coins anymore because we don't use them anymore. So the naira has basically fallen by so much since our central bank was established, and since we started to use our naira notes, our naira. So things have just been going from bad to worse. In 2015, we had a new president coming. $1 was 200 naira on the black market at the time, and people were losing their minds that how can this be? The president has ruined the currency. And 2015 to 2024, the currency has gone from 200 naira to $1 to 1,520 naira to $1. So a lot has happened in the last 9 years. We elected a progressive. The presidents before the current president and the one before him, it's not like they were capitalist or free market people. So let me explain this. In Nigeria, the political and economic spectrum is very narrow. Our Overton window here is pretty narrow. We don't have you don't have anyone talking about free markets here. There is zero talk of free markets in the mainstream in Nigeria. People pay lip service to the free market. They will say, we're going to let the market operate. And then when you read the actual policy, it's subsidize this, it's tax this, it's basically government intervention, right? So some of them know how to pay lip service to the free market, but they do absolutely nothing. And that is very, very damaging to people like us who are actually preaching free markets. I got into an argument with a couple of socialists, and because we have actual socialists in the country, I got into an argument with a couple of them today, and I was trying to get them to see that IMF and World Bank policies are not capitalist policies. These are not free market policies, and they kept saying, I'm serving my capitalist overlords, the people who are asking for the government to increase taxes and spend on insert sector. Yeah, so that's just as an aside. So as I was saying, the Overton window here is very small, right? So the range is from Keynesianism to socialism. We don't have anything to the right of Keynes here. Absolutely nothing to the right of Keynes here. So no matter what party wins in Nigeria, the socialists win. That's just so our situation is. Although I have hope in this situation, and I'll get to why I think this is good later.
How has that
But
been living through that? I mean, you've been living in Nigeria for, you've been there for a couple of decades.
all my life.
Yeah, whole life. So how has your on the ground experience been as the currency has been devalued from, you said 200 to $1 all the way down to 1,500 to $1? Like what have the implications of that been in your lived day-to-day experience?
It's very horrible. Everything is very, very expensive. Wages are not growing. And all I can say is things are very, very expensive. So I was going to talk, I intend to talk about the fiat phenomenon in Nigeria. So the effect of this, it's on the outline. It's the third thing I intend to talk about, how this has shaped the country. It has really changed the people. So first of all, it's difficult, right? It's very expensive. Before anyone can afford to buy a car. I mean, it doesn't have to be a good car or a brand new car. It could be a fairly used, a secondhand car. So when they use cars in the US and Europe, they send them here. People buy them. It's not the best, but that's how we've been getting by for decades, right? But you can't do that. If you saved your salary for 2 years, you still can't buy a car in this country unless you're a politician or a super big businessman. And business here is just being is crony capitalism. They're just cronies, allies of the government. So they aren't real businessmen, in any sense of the word. So yeah, things are very, very, very difficult here. Schools are on strike and teachers can't be paid. I don't think we're far from Venezuela. I think at this rate, we are maybe at most 5 years away from eating rats. And my people will be mad at me for saying this, but it's probably most likely going to happen if things continue this way. I think we're going to have to start eating rats in 5 years. Yeah.
And that was something that actually occurred in Venezuela. People were eating, I heard eating their pets. I never heard eating rats, but yeah, that was, due to the persistent inflation, people can't, the economy doesn't work, right? So desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah.
And so what is the hope then? Where do you said you see some hope on the horizon? Where is that coming from?
So my hope is in, not to sound conceited or anything. I like to tell people upfront, I don't have a messiah complex. I don't think I'm going to save my country or save the world. But I believe, I hope I will be able to contribute to progress in this society. So there's something called there's this phenomenon in science. It's called the Mpemba effect. I don't know if you've noticed this. Hot water, like actual hot water, cools much faster than room temperature. It freezes rather faster than room temperature water. So if you keep hot water, on average, if you keep hot water in a freezer and you keep water at room temperature in a freezer, the hot water tends to freeze faster than the cold water. So I actually experienced this, bathing with hot water. The hot water normally got to room temperature faster than lukewarm water, and it didn't make any sense to me. So I looked it up and I found out it was a thing. So it's called the Mpemba effect. You should try it out. It's an actual thing. So I sort of see it as a principle that works not only in science, in physics or chemistry, but I also see it as a principle that could work with people. How do I mean? So I've noticed in the West, there is a, should I say, almost 50-50 split. You have the right and the left. So every time there's push from the right, there's push back from the left. It just keeps going back and forth. No one ever, no real progress being made, if you think about it in the West. But So in a manner of speaking, the West is like tepid water. It's like lukewarm water, right? And if the goal is to get the water cold, which is to move it entirely in one direction, I believe Nigeria is already it's not like I believe, it's a fact. Nigeria is already to the left. Where, as I've said, Keynesianism to socialism, that's the spectrum here. So we are all together on the left. So we can only go rightward. Right is the only way for us to go, right? So just as the hot water would cool faster than lukewarm water, I believe Nigerians would be open to these ideas. And I've seen it happen. This sort of segues into the work that I do here in the country. So since I discovered Rothbard and Mises, and I really understood the things that Hayek was saying, that Friedman was saying, that Thomas Sowell was saying, I decided I wasn't going to sit down and watch my country burn, right? Not if I have anything to do to stop it, right? So I'm nobody. I'm not the son of a politician. I'm not a wealthy person. I'm just some ordinary nobody, in Nigeria. But I have the knowledge. By God's grace, I'm of average intelligence. I'm very great at communicating to people, especially my people. I know I might not be communicating great to you now, but my people, I know how to talk to them. Okay, thank you. I know how to talk to my people. I'm very, very good at convincing people, especially young people. So I decided. So initially, I decided to reach, because we had elections last year, presidential elections. So I reached out to a couple of politicians to try to see if I could get into their campaigns, maybe meet the presidential candidates and talk to them. I believe I have a gift. I really do have a gift of convincing people. I know you're a Christian, so I can say this confident. I can say this freely to you. I'm a preacher. That's my day job. I'm a Christian preacher, right? So it's like the major thing I do. So I know how to speak to people. Like I'm practicing speaking to people and convincing people, changing their minds. So I felt, okay, if I could reach this man, I might just be able to convince him of these ideas. And I got to one of the campaign officers of one of the leading politicians. And basically what I was told was, the big man has no interest in any of these things you're saying. All he wants to know is, how many votes can you get him? And now I did not hear this from the big man himself.
Right.
He has, they have gatekeepers who won't let you get to him,
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready to play that game. And I pulled out of the campaign. I tried to join myself to another political campaign. That also didn't work out. And I just decided, instead of doing this, right, I would try and gather what resources I can and go directly to the people. Let me play the long game, right? I'm much better at talking to younger people than I am talking to older people. So I said I would go to young people and talk to them about these ideas. These ideas, Austrian economics Austro-libertarianism as a whole is a very, very interesting thing. It's not, I studied economics 4 years at the university. Very, very boring. It makes you want to slit your own throat. It's incredibly boring. All the graphs and mathematical models and all that nonsense that doesn't even work. You have to sit through that hours and hours. But Austrian economics is, just tune into any Tom Woods lecture, any Walter Block lecture, even old lectures from Rothbard and Mises. Very interesting, very easy to understand. And for places like Nigeria, these ideas are exotic. They haven't heard anything of the sort. Everything they hear is the government must raise taxes and then spend the tax on building roads. So when we start talking to them about things that are entirely different from what they know, they don't, they're intrigued. They don't agree normally, but then they're intrigued and then they start to listen. Anyway, so I started to host seminars at universities around the country. Mm-hmm. So I talk to people, and because our biggest problem so far is inflation, our biggest problem is a monetary problem. I don't focus too much on markets. I do that in my writings. I have 3 articles on I have a free Substack where I post my articles there. So I talk about taxes and regulation there. But when I go to these students, I talk to them about money. So I just talk to them about money, get them to understand money, how money originated, the various forms of money, and what. And so my last seminar was in June of last year, right? I would have loved to do more than that, but I'm strapped for. I don't have enough. I'm doing this alone. So I the last one in June, when I spoke to them about what the central bank does, how the central bank is basically a counterfeiting cartel. Their minds were blown. Now these are university students from their first year. So we have 4 years in university here. First through 4 years. So we had all the years represented in at the seminar, and none of them knew what I was talking about. Wow. But they all walked away thinking, this is very interesting. Why don't we know this? Why don't our professors teach this? And some of those people actually came back to me and they were like, we want to know more. So I started a group with them where we discuss online. We have weekly group meetings like this is, where we talk about these things, where I teach them. I'm hoping there are a couple of them on Twitter that I've been speaking with. And there are some I even just met them on Twitter. They saw my tweets and they're like, well, this is interesting. Tell me more. So I gave them, thank God for the Mises Institute and the good work they're doing. They give out their books for free. So I always tell people, here, man, economy and state. Here, what has government done to our money? Economics in one lesson. So I just hand them out and people are reading them and it's slow, but I see a lot of, I can really see this catching on, and that's my hope. That's my hope. The exotic nature of the ideas, very, very exotic, very simple to understand. And the fact that people are tired, just like Argentinians were tired of socialism in their country and decided to go all the way to an ANCAP, self-proclaimed ANCAP. Just so I feel Nigeria is almost at that point where I think we might get maybe one or two more socialists for the pain to really, really, for people to really feel the pain. And then I think in the same way, they would run towards solutions like the ones we offer. So my goal is that in 10 to 15 years, I would have either directly or indirectly reached at least 1 million Nigerian people. So these million people are going to be politicians tomorrow. They're going to be businessmen. They're going to be teachers. Basically, I want to subvert the system. That's my goal.
That's great.
If you are a business owner or manager, you should know these 3 numbers: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000 is the number of businesses that have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, which allows you to streamline accounting, financial management, human resources, and more. NetSuite turns 25 years old this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days rather than weeks, and to drive down cost. And finally, 1, because your business is one of a kind. So with NetSuite, you get a customized solution for all your key performance indicators in one efficient system with one source of truth. NetSuite is everything you need all in one place. Right now, you can download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/whatismoney. That's netsuite.com/whatismoney to get your free KPI checklist. Again, netsuite.com/whatismoney.
I heard, or I guess I read in the news, that there was an attempt to push out a CBDC in Nigeria. Yeah. And that Nigerians resisted that implementation and that it was ultimately abandoned or postponed. Could you tell me a bit about that? Like what I guess this is called the e-Naira?
Yes.
What was the outcome of that project or where is it today?
Yeah, so this is one of the most misunderstood monetary stories out of Nigeria. So I follow Professor St. Onge and most of the guys at the Mises Institute. So whenever there is something Nigeria related, I'm usually the guy ask, hey, what's happening here? So people put out articles, even there were articles on the Mises Institute saying the same thing, that Nigerians rejected central bank digital currencies. So here is actually what happened. They tried to roll out the e-Naira, our CBDC, in 2001, but it didn't fly. Like no one was interested in it. People were skeptical. They thought it was cryptocurrency. So nobody really knew what it was. Thankfully, our government is bad at everything, even at propaganda, right? So they were not able to spread the information to convince people to use the e-Naira. So that didn't fly at all. People didn't know what it was. However, in 2022, towards the end of 2022, our president, our central bank announced that they were going to redesign our currency. That's what they called it, a currency redesign. So they said our 1,000 Naira notes, our 1,000 Naira bill, 500 Naira bill, and 200 Naira bill are three highest denominations. They said those bills are not going to be in circulation after so and so time. So turn in the old notes and then we'll give you the new ones. So those of us who, some of us smelt a rat immediately. This sounds suspicious, but people went in and turned in their cash because they were scared. And then the government told them, fine, we'll give you the cash later. So you go into the bank and pay your Naira, and then they just credit your account. So that was where people started to shout. They're trying to give us a central bank digital currency. But so that was actually what. So the reason why they did that. So in Nigeria, we have a problem here. During elections, politicians literally buy votes with cash. So they go to the villages. People are terribly poor here. So they give them 5,000 Naira, which is like $2-3 now. They give them 5,000 Naira. Then they show their voter ID, and then they vote for the candidates that gave them the 5,000 Naira. That's what they do here. So during election season, you have wads of cash floating around, and the last president was trying to put a stop to that, which was why he said they were going to redesign the Naira so that people would turn in their cash, and then those who had plans to buy votes would not be able to do that. Now, so that was, it wasn't about central bank digital currencies at all. So the Western media got that entirely wrong. It wasn't about central bank digital currencies. So immediately after the elections, cash was back in circulation. Now, people got it wrong because there were riots and people were burning banks. So people were saying Nigerians were protesting CBDCs. No, people were just hungry. They didn't have access to their money. And unlike advanced countries of the world, I would say 60% of our population does not have access to internet banking of any sort. So people were left hungry, unable to transact. So they were obviously those people who take to the streets and burn banks and beat banking officials and all that. So immediately after the elections in February, cash, a week later, there was cash everywhere. So it's not like Nigerians fought against central bank digital currencies. Now, I would have loved it if Nigerians in fact fought against it, because that would mean there is something in us that is weary of governments having that kind of power, right? But that wasn't what happened. I said this to Dr. Bob Murphy when I was on his show. I believe if the Nigerian government has a way of getting people enough internet coverage and people are educated enough here to use internet banking services, Nigeria would be the easiest place in the world to push central bank digital currencies. We love the government in this place. So Nigeria is not some example of a freedom-loving people that push back against authoritarianism. Not at all. Nigerians will sit and take anything that daddy government tells them to take. So I would have loved for it to be the case, but that was...
Why is that? So why do you think that is a product of conditioning? Is this a cultural thing? Like, what is the excessive willingness to comply? What is that about?
It's a cultural thing. My society is very big on respect. Respect your elders, respect your parents. We bow when greeting our elders. I know you might have met one or two Nigerians who maybe don't do that, but generally that's how we are here. You bow before your elders, you greet. We're slowly losing that good part of our culture to Western progressivism. We're slowly losing that. But generally, that's how Nigerians are. We're very respectful. So we are told to respect the government. I mean, if you respect mother and father, mother and father respect state officials, obviously respect them. So there is a cultural aspect to it. There is also, so we have a large Muslim population here. Nigeria is like 50% Muslim, 50% Christian. So there's also the Muslims also have this respect for the authority that's above them. And if the leader happens to be a Muslim, that's better for them, so it's easy for them to, so there's that as well. There's also, I don't know, I think we were beating it. So there's this story. There is a one of the heroes in Nigerian history, Jaja Opobo is his name. He was Jaja is a title, like king of a place called Opobo. So this man, he was like the Shaka Zulu of Nigeria. He fought against the colonial masters, and it didn't really end well for him, but he fought against them. And so people from that region are actually known to be weary of authority. I don't know how else to not to be careful with my words, because people are very sensitive about these things here. So
skeptical of authority.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Let me say that. They were skeptical of authority, but I think colonialism broke the spirit of those people. So everybody just, by the way, I'm not one of those, anyway, I'm not going to say so people just love authority. Here, let me just leave it at that. So I'm not self-censoring because I'm afraid that this will be demonetized or whatever. Here, it's life and death. It's not, a girl was stoned and burned to death at a university in this country because they said she blasphemed the Prophet of Islam. We don't know whether it's true or not, but it actually happened. So again, it's life and death.
Wow.
So that's why
that was recent.
Last year.
Wow.
Yeah, last year.
Wow. Is it a mostly Muslim country?
It's 50-50. They say it's mostly Muslim, but I don't think so. I think it's 50-50. But the north is Muslim, the south is Christian. That's how it is. And you have Christians in the north and Muslims in the south as well. But majorly Christians are in the south. So up north is where I say it's more dangerous in the north. These people in the south are a little more progressive. If I lived in the south, I would be less cautious. For instance, homosexuality does not work here. It doesn't fly here at all. It's illegal. You get a 14-year sentence for being gay. Without the intent, I don't know how they're going to police gay, but okay. It's one thing if they find people in the act. It's apart from that, I don't know how else they intend to police being gay. So in the north, it's taken very, very seriously. But down south, even though it's against the law, it's frowned upon in the south, but nobody really cares. Do you? Yeah. So that's how the country is divided.
Sounds like there's just a lot of challenges living there. What is the role of Bitcoin in all of this? Does Bitcoin stand to fix some of the problems from a monetary standpoint in Nigeria and possibly beyond just the monetary sphere? Like, obviously, we talk a lot about Bitcoin and we talk about many of the second order effects it creates, right? You fix the money, you fix this, you fix the culture, you fix governance, etc. How do you view the role of Bitcoin in fixing problems in Nigeria?
So I genuinely believe fix the money, fix the people. I genuinely believe that. I say it and people say, I'm just being fanatical. I'm being idealistic. But I genuinely believe that if your money is bad, then your people will most likely go the way the money goes. And so if you have good money, if you have sound, non-inflationary money, I believe it will go a long way. So there are certain factors that are cultural, right? Okay, so let me give this example. I was talking with Zubi when he was here last year. We had a lengthy conversation. We met and we were discussing, and then I was explaining some of these things to him. And I told him this fix the money, fix the people thing. And I pointed out to him that countries that have high inflation usually, I'll get to Bitcoin, like this, I'm building up to it. So I explained to him that countries, if you observe countries that have, as the currency starts to decline in value, as you have inflation, you start to see rise in crime. I mean, obviously, I don't need to explain to anyone why that is. You start to see all kinds of crazy things here in Nigeria. So kidnapping is like the most lucrative business here in the country now. People are being, a girl was kidnapped. A girl, her sister, and I think her mother were kidnapped in their home in the city where I live 2 or 3 weeks ago. And one of the children was killed just to prove, a 15 or 16-year-old girl was killed just to prove to her parents that they were not playing around. So that kind of thing. And it wasn't like that.
Is it ransom? What's the point of the kidnapping?
Yeah, ransom. It's not like it's ransom. So you can't travel. A train was attacked, I think last year or 2 years ago. The train was attacked and people were kidnapped, and someone, a young lady, I think a medical doctor, was killed on the train, just during the while they were trying to hold up the train, and the girl was tweeting, with her last breath, because the train passes through what I would call a forest. It's like empty, barren, not barren, just a forest. So she was tweeting, kidnappers just hijacked the train, and I was shot and bleeding, and people were swearing at her, calling her a bitch. The pro-government people saying she just hates the president, she hates the country, and the next day they found her corpse, and where she said, where she tweeted that she was, so things like that happen all the time. People a man was kidnapped, literally a stone throw away from my house. When I say literally a stone throw away from my house, someone was kidnapped very close to where I live very recently. So,
and what is the connection here? What is for the people that don't understand the connection between the debasement of the money and this rise in crime? What is the connection?
Okay, so as money loses its value, people all of a sudden want more of it, because if you have, if $10 was sufficient to meet your needs in the past, but after inflation, you can barely eat lunch with $10, then you want to get more money, which in itself is the definition of avarice, of greed. So just and human beings have a tendency to both good and evil, but unfortunately it's much easier for us to follow the evil side of our, as Christians will call it. It's easier to follow our flesh. So when the money starts to lose its value, you start to want more of it because it doesn't last in your hands. And then this tends to make people do, and there are only, in a country where, in a society where you have inflation, it's automatic that there will be other economic problems like unemployment, right? There won't be jobs, or the jobs would not pay well. Mm-hmm. So there is very little you can do legally to make more money to meet your needs. And people have to meet their needs. People won't just, so people who would not steal otherwise, people who would not, women or men who would not prostitute themselves, would begin to do that, right? Out of desperation. So prostitution is also on the rise here. These things have always happened, but they were in the fringe of societies. It wasn't rampant, right? But there's so much prostitution here. There's so much stealing, robbery, internet fraud, and people just want to get rich quick, because unlike during the days of our parents, when 100,000 naira could do a whole lot for you, today 500,000 naira can't do much for you. So people want to get rich quick. And then there is this very, very horrifying thing that happens here now. Again, this started it resurfaced in 2021 when the previous president increased the money printing. So the previous president really dialed the printers up to 11. And as soon as the money started to circulate and prices started to increase, there was something that used to happen in the 70s and in the 80s in Nigeria. We have ritual killings where you go meet some native doctor, some witch doctor, and then he tells you to bring a human head or to bring a virgin for sacrifice. So these things I thought were in our past, right? But now we actually have, because of the internet, we have videos of 10-year-old boys who went to see it's all over the internet. If you are interested in horrifying yourself with those videos, I could send them to you, of 10-year-old boys who were told by some witch doctor to bring a girl as a sacrifice, and they kidnapped some 3-year-old kid, beheaded her, chopped her into bits. 10-year-old kids. I mean, so I call this the fiat phenomenon. Fiat has destroyed. It's not only destroying commodity quality, it's not only making things more expensive, it is literally turning the people into monsters. Now, where culture comes into this, which was the discussion I had with Zubi. Zubi pointed out, this doesn't happen in Japan. This doesn't happen in the UAE. They have inflation as well in those places. I was like, first of all, the inflation is not the same. Secondly, they have things in their culture. For instance, the Middle Eastern culture, they have Sharia law, where if you steal, they cut off your hand. So that deters people from going to extremes, although it would not deter them for long. The inflation will get to a rate where people will damn the consequences. Right. If it's lose my hand while stealing, or perhaps steal and be successful and not die, people will still steal, even in those communities. So I pointed out to Zubi that in places like Japan, they have cultures that don't tolerate certain kinds of things, those kinds of things. However, the inflation would affect their people in other ways. That greed is going to find a way to manifest. In Nigeria, where we have a culture, we have many cultures that believe in witchcraft and voodoo and all that satanic nonsense. It's very difficult to not believe in God if you live in this country and you are open and you open your eyes to what's going on. It's very difficult. You see so much evil that you just have to believe that there is some divine justice that's going to come for the evil people. So in our country, where we came from a place of ritual sacrifices, I kid you not, I am like just 3 generations removed from ritual killers, from people who worship idols and sacrifice twins, to the gods in the evil forest. I'm 3 generations. My great-grandfather did that nonsense, right. So it's not far behind us, right? So
this, I mean, what I'm hearing you say here is there is this kind of a metaphysical propagation of evil, right? When you start to, again, when you inflate the money supply, it's such a euphemism, right? It sounds so harmless. Like, what do you mean? We don't have enough money. Let's make more money. That sounds great. But what you're actually doing is you're just stealing from people, right? Systematically. So it's systematic theft, which is obviously evil, right? If it's something you don't want done to you and you purposefully do it to another person, I mean, that's a definition of evil, right? You're using self-reflection to be like, oh, what would I not want to happen to me? Let me go and do that to someone else, right? That is, it's inherent to the nature of evil. And so when the systematic theft starts to occur, it narrows the options for legal wealth acquisition, right? People can't get a normal job and make ends meet. So therefore they become more desperate, right? And therefore more willing to engage in illicit activities of any kind to survive, right? To get food, to get shelter, whatever it may be. And although I hear, the point you make is accurate, I think. So it has a lot to do with how acute is the inflation, obviously. The inflation that Nigeria is experiencing is much more acute than what is going on in Japan, UAE, United States, etc. The other piece to that is that the capital stocks are much higher in those developed countries.
Exactly.
Whereas in Nigeria, there's not much capital stock. So people are already at the edge of their economic livelihood, and they're getting robbed with this very acute, and systematic inflation. That's basically, there's no way to get ahead, right? If there's no way to get ahead, well, of course you're going to go crazy, basically, right? You're being treated like an animal, so you start to act like an animal.
Exactly.
And so it's hard. I appreciate you going into these uncomfortable places, because it's easy to get lost in abstraction when you talk about economics and money and all of these things, and then people find it very difficult to bridge the intellectual gap. It's like, well, how do you go from this world of like abstract financial concepts into this world of like culture and crime, like where people are actually moving and acting in real time? But I think that, I would assume most economists would agree, money really is probably the primary motivational force in the world. And it's not to say people are inherently evil and they're all chasing money. It's like, no, money is just the primary means for survival. So as an organism that's trying to survive and reproduce into the future at some point, like money is like one of the main tools you need, right? It's like food, shelter, money. Well, or money's better than food and shelter because money can get you food.
Yes.
So when you corrupt that primary economic, social, socioeconomic fabric, it doesn't seem surprising to me that there's this proliferation of corruption and crime and just social corrosion. So it's not fun to talk about, but I appreciate you, talking about that, because it needs to be talked about so that it can be addressed.
Yeah. So now again, this brings us to Bitcoin, right? So I only got into cryptocurrencies a couple of months ago. So and to be fair, reality was what brought me to the cryptocurrency side. If you read Rothbard, you read Mises, you leave them being a gold bug, right? I'm one of those Peter Schiff, Keith Weiner kind of people. I love gold. I love silver. I love metal monies, right? But then, how do you buy those in Nigeria, given the fact that people can't even afford to eat here? How do you buy gold? How do you stop the government from confiscating gold? Well, with very, very little naira, you can buy cryptocurrencies, right? You can buy cryptocurrencies, and if I decide to trade my commodities in gold, for example. Now, this is not to say I'm anti-gold. I'm very, very pro-gold. If I were the president of Nigeria today, of course, I would let the market decide what I would lean. I personally would lean towards gold and silver. But I concluded that it's almost impossible for gold to become money at this time in this kind of society, right? It's expensive. It's easily confiscated. It's not something you can, if you have to leave the country, it's not something you can just easily take with you. It's not easily saleable. Like, how do you find someone to buy your gold here? Perhaps in America, yes, you have dealers, but it's not the same here. So I had to face reality at some point that if we are going to subvert the monetary system, if we're going to subvert the government, cryptocurrencies have to be on the table. So I decided that going forward in my seminars, rather than just talk about good money and let the market decide, I will also include. So I prepared a cryptocurrency segment, talking about how cryptocurrencies can be used to subvert the government, to subvert the money, and to put a stop to this problem. So I have some money saved up for my next event, and I got the money through cryptocurrency. It was actually the Monero people, and some of them helped me out, right? So I saw how useful it was and how the value just didn't fall like the way the Naira falls. It held its value throughout the period I held it. So I saw how easy it was to just send and receive.
Yeah.
No stress, no banks, no. So so don't knock it till you try it. Basically was what I was knocking it before I tried it.
Yeah.
Right. So I've gotten into Bitcoin as well. And I intend to teach these things to my students when I go to these. I even want to do, someone suggested that if I go to a place where they don't have cryptocurrencies, maybe I could just give them maybe $1, $2, $3 worth of the stuff, just distribute to a couple of students, let them hold it, maybe let them trade it for Naira and spend, they see, oh, this is nice, let the Bitcoin value go up, and then they see the value of their coins increase. Those kinds of things are very interesting. So
yeah, I like the mantra that where your money goes, your mind follows, which maybe you could say it more specifically, like where you place your purchasing power is what you start to think about in a way. And so you get people just holding Bitcoin, right? They start to study Bitcoin naturally, and they study Bitcoin. Well, what is Bitcoin? First question after that is, Bitcoin is money. Okay, what is money? That's obviously this whole podcast of this, or the rabbit hole of this podcast rather. So it's important, right? By any means necessary, I think just getting people to ask this fundamental question and take a look at the reality of the world we live in, right? We have a world based on corrupt money. What are the consequences of that? I mean, you could argue that they are more or less severe, but I don't think anyone can argue that they're not negative. I mean, they're emphatically negative, right? If to the extent that theft is bad, fiat currency is bad. It's only a tool for theft. So I think it's really important that you're educating people and awakening them to this reality. And I really focus on Bitcoin, but it's good to hear the Monero people helping you out. I don't think it's decentralized. I don't think that it will persist into the future, which is why I really just narrow my focus to Bitcoin. But if the tool is working right now for people and helping you do your events and help people transact and escape inflation, and so be it. Let them use the best tool for the job. I think it's freedom above all else. So, Econ Bro, man, I think this has been a great overview of the nature of money in Nigeria. Again, I appreciate you diving into some of these deeper, darker domains. Like, these things do need to be talked about for people to take the corruption of money seriously. This is not just some academic, abstract exercise. This is a technology that is very important for human beings, human cooperation, human peace, human prosperity. And if we don't build some awareness around its corruption, then I don't see a lot of hope for the human race, frankly. So thank you again for that. Do you have any closing words? Or if not, you could just let people know where they can find you on the internet.
Just on my Twitter, Econ Bro, ECONBREAU. That's my Twitter handle, ECONBREAU. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for letting me tell my story to your audience. Hopefully, I'll be able to get followers, support of any kind. Anything to help push this cause forward. Maybe someone else might watch this interview and say, hey, come on my show and talk about what you're doing. I have stories to tell, and hopefully maybe if I return some other time, there are wacky stories to tell, things, wacky things that happen here. Perhaps I'll come on some other time to talk about it. Thank you very much for having me on. God bless you.
Thank you so much.